The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network. Above the clouds of the Blue Ridge Mountains, there's a place where the noise fades and your breath comes easier. The Art of Living Retreat Center offers signature meditation, breathwork, and yoga retreats designed to calm the mind and renew the spirit. Choose a guided program, a self-paced R&R stay, or join inspiring guest teachers from around the world. Visit artoflivingretreatcenter.org and use code PODCAST for 20% off. Retreat to the mountain. Return to yourself.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
Today, the reason I picked these cards is because this is the back of the card, and it has this symbol on it. And I don't know if that is a recognized symbol of the Divine Feminine, but I've kind of come to the realization that it is.
Yeah.
And I found this picture I don't know if it was in the Pope's office or whatever, but it was a picture of the Pope. And there was a picture in the background with that symbol with, was it Jesus stepping out of it?
Yeah,
and
that was so cool.
That shape is very unique. Anyway, so I was really thinking, I want to pull these cards out.
I love it.
So, yeah, the one I got today was Thecla.
Ooh.
And do you know anything about her?
I've never heard of her.
So I'm going to tell a little bit about her, if that's okay.
I love it.
She is the prophetess of true power.
Wow.
And the acts of Paul and Thecla date back to the 2nd century, though they believe it could be even earlier than that. It relates to a young woman's call to a life of teaching and healing in the Christ movement in current day Turkey. So Thecla was the daughter of Theoclia. At the age of 17, she overhears Paul teaching about Christ. And she stays rooted in a place at her window for 3 days so she doesn't miss a word about Paul's teachings or of Paul's teachings. Her mother had arranged for her to be married, so when she feels like she's called to begin her own ministry, she is sentenced to burn for refusing to be a bride. And just as the flames are surrounding her, she makes the sign of the cross, and a huge storm puts the fire out. So she finds Paul, cuts her hair short, and tells him, "Only give me the seal of Christ, and no trial will touch me." And he says, I don't think you're ready for baptism yet. And then some other guy tries to take her for a bride, and she tears off his cloak, takes the crown from his head, and shames him for trying to take her without consent. And then she's sentenced to death by wild beasts. Okay, so
wow.
She's still 17.
Wow.
In the arena, all the women protest judgment of Thecla, proclaiming her innocence. A huge lioness enters the arena, approaches Thecla, then licks her feet and bows before her. Thecla enters a pool in the arena that is filled with wild sea lions. The women fear she'll be killed, but she declares, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I baptize myself." Suddenly she is shielded and protected by a great ring of fire, and a glowing white robe suddenly appears on her body. And Paul tells her, "Go and teach the word of God."
Okay, I think I've heard of her.
You have? Okay, yeah. It says it's recorded in the Acts of Paul that she lived until 90 and enlightened many.
Wow.
Why isn't she in modern day scripture? I want to know.
Right.
Well, I guess it says that she's mentioned. But her ministry proves the existence of a female authority in the early Christian church, which is awesome. And so when this card gets pulled, I really tried to give the intention that someone listening to this podcast needs this. But that her story echoes from the ancient world to the modern world. Your life is up to you. Yes, there is the power of prayer, of faith, and of asking all possible spiritual support. But there's also divine will within each of us. It's will that's aligned with the soul's purpose. Remember what true power is when we divest all outside authority of the power we've been giving them. Power is calling back all the control we give to others to dictate our lives, our potential life partners, our family members, our culture, even our ego's idea of who we should be. She reminds us that we do not need permission to be who we are. We can cut our hair short. We can baptize ourselves. We're not bound by anything except the dictates of our own soul.
Wow.
We
That's
have all the power
huge.
right now. I know.
That's huge. And
That's a
that's
pretty
totally
powerful card.
belonging. That's totally
That
belonging to herself.
is.
Someone else says, you can't do that. And she just did it herself. Like, go
Did.
girl. And I think, I think it's beautiful. Like, I feel like that's a beautiful story. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
That is a beautiful story.
So we're talking about the woo-woo wisdom of braving the wilderness, and we talk about how woo-woo has become less woo over time. Everybody's doing our woo stuff. We were trying to be weird and awkward,
Serious.
and now it's just normal. What are you doing to us? So bear with us. This might not be as woo as you think, but
Seriously.
one of the things that was really, woo-woo in the book, which isn't, like I say, which isn't that woo-woo, is this emphasis on this shared humanity and our collective energy. And she tells
Okay.
two different stories I thought was interesting. She describes being at a U2 concert, and
Oh,
there was
yeah.
tens of thousands of people there, and they were singing and swaying together and holding hands. And she says it was emotional, not just because of the music, but because of the feeling of connection. She called it collective effervescence, a term coined by sociologist Emily Durkheim to describe the energy and harmony people feel when they come together for a shared purpose. So think of that moment. Like, I feel like I can just be like, oh, I know exactly what she's talking about, right?
Oh, I
Like,
know
you know
exactly
exactly
what
what
she's
she's
talking
talking about. But we're at a U2 concert, right? You're at a U2
Yeah.
concert. But she also recalls getting, there was a vigil. How do you say that?
Mm-hmm.
Vigil?
I think so.
Where I think so, where strangers stood side by side in grief, lighting candles, and there was no small talk, there was no ideology, and everybody was just present. And both of these had that connective feel to it, even though they were totally different experiences. She could feel, there was the connection in both. And she
Yeah.
says these moments of shared experiences, whether joyful or painful or somewhere in between, are the antidote to loneliness and disconnection.
That's so fascinating. So I remember those. I remember for some reason more specifically the one she talked about it wasn't Manchester, it was the other football league,
Oh yeah.
soccer, singing their song and how like everyone was just so full of it. I don't want to
Yes.
say full of it. They were full of this collective effervescence.
Right.
And I've experienced those things. And I think in my past life, I used to kind of call it the spirit. I don't know if that was your experience, but we used to say, like, well, if you feel that way, then it's obviously the Holy Ghost. And as I've kind of deconstructed religion a little bit, I've really felt more of this collective effervescence idea that rather than it just being, this grand spirit coming over us, it's like all of us
Right.
sharing this moment together. And because we're doing it, it feels so good. And so I've looked at different experiences I've had, like she talked about with Harry Potter when, I don't even know why. Oh, I gotta take a second.
Oh,
So dumb.
it's not though. That's the thing is that
Oh,
the YouTube concert, somebody else would be like, that's so dumb, but that's the
I
thing
know.
is it's not, it's an experience.
Yeah.
You can't fight it.
Um, but when double, so I can't even talk about it. But anyway, and it's spoiler alert, Dumbledore dies in Harry Potter, and when when Professor McGonagall sticks her wand up, like she said, everybody had their hands up,
Mm-hmm.
and how powerful that is. And I've always loved movies that show that collective effervescence. So
Mm-hmm.
Dead Poet Society was my favorite movie in
Yes.
high school, and that was that group, right? They all stood up for him at the end. Swing Kids was another one. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't, oh, you
I
need
need
to
to watch
find
it.
it.
Okay.
But it's these kids that in their protest of Hitler, they're doing swing dancing, which was illegal. And just them bounding together to swing dance. I mean, they were all
Mm-hmm.
sweaty. It was gross, but they were doing that. Les Miserables is another one where you
Mm-hmm.
just people banding together to fight for what they believe in, or even just being together
Mm-hmm.
is so powerful. It makes my soul so happy.
Yes.
I can remember being, we were, our our church congregation was fasting for someone who's having foot surgery. And I remember sitting there at that exact moment being like, we are all doing something together. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And that feeling, that belonging feeling, like even with the Harry Potter, the wands up, if I could have been there, it would be so amazing.
Right.
So anyway, I don't want to apologize for my tears, but that was really embarrassing. But because I'm feeling
Authentic.
it.
It's authentic
coming
and
out.
yeah, I love it. But I feel like that's the beauty of it because if we had to break down your emotions, tears are coming out, but I know you're not sad, right?
No.
It's all the emotions, all it's so emotional. It's happy, it's like tender, it's like grateful. It's all of those
It's
things.
exciting. And a
Yeah,
part of
it's
it is so
exciting.
exciting.
Right. It's and that's being in those places. That's what makes it so sacred is it's so beyond. And like you say, I think we used to just think it would fit in this one little box. And now I feel like we can have that with anybody. I don't care what they look like. We can have these experiences.
Yeah.
And she says actually, it's not about agreeing with everyone or even knowing each other's names. It's about sharing a moment where you feel like you belong to something greater than yourself. We
Yes.
we are wired for connection, but the key is that in any given moment, it has to be real. It's like that
Yeah.
connection is really real, meaning it doesn't work and it's like, okay, you have to fit these standards to fit this, and now we're going to be all connected. Like it's not. It has to be
Right.
genuine. It has to be outside of judgment. You know what I mean? That's when you get that real flow of that energy, that collective effervescence. It has to be
Yes.
completely everyone's authentic and everybody's included and there is no exclusion, right?
Yeah. I wonder if people feel that like when they're LARPing, like we kind of giggle about it, but like they're all together. They're there. They're
Yeah,
they're being vulnerable in that moment, right? They're like, I'm showing
true.
up, I'm pretending.
Yeah.
And like I think about some people I know that would never in their lives do that. And if
Mhm.
they were there, it would be different. It would be ruined a little bit, because they would be embarrassed. They wouldn't want to do it. But those everybody's being there and being invested in that moment,
Mhm.
that's the vulnerability, that's the authenticity, and that's what makes it so amazing. There
Right.
was something interesting when they talked about the people that started turning it into a science, which I'm like, you're taking this away from the woo a little bit, because they were
Yeah.
figuring out a way to measure that collective effervescence, or that they called it collective assembly, I think is what they
Mm.
were, the scientists,
Yeah.
but I was like, thought that was really interesting that they're trying to find a way to measure it, which makes it science.
Right.
So maybe more people will believe in it, but yeah, it,
But it,
it
but
takes it
it
away from
is
the woo.
it is a woo because it is an energy. And so I'm going to put a link in the show notes because if you ever watched like YouTube videos or whatever of like metronomes and how they sync up, have you ever watched that?
Oh,
So, okay, I'm going to put a link in the description because so they start all these metronomes and within 3 minutes they're all together. They're all
what?
and so it's a phenomenon that's like it's really there. It's not like people are necessarily are choosing in. It's like in the air. Does that
Wow.
it's like the energy. We're picking up on that energy and it's flowing. And so these inanimate objects they sync up. They sync up. And so I'll put a link in it. It's kind of fascinating to watch because it's a real thing. It's a real thing. But
Wow.
like again, it needs to have, and I don't know how this works in that case, but it needs to be real and be authentic. And there needs to be, it's not like you can just force it. It happens. And if we allow it, it's an allowing to be in those
But I
situations.
even wonder, like, let's say you were at the U2 concert and you had 10 people there who did not want to be there.
Right.
That I was wrong. I don't think that would ruin it. I think they'd probably
Right.
be raised up to that vibration and start to feel it and be like,
Right. Get pulled in.
I
I
don't
think so
know.
too. I think so too. I think so too. So that's what it's called. That's the synchronization or that's the what do they call it? It's like I can't think of the word. Everybody's yelling at me. But it's a real phenomenon that we can be part of if we choose to. But it's not something that it's like air, wind, air, like air, wind, fire. It's like an element, like this synchronization, this
Hmm.
connection is like real. It's really real. Okay, another thing that she talked about in the book, which I loved, that I put it in this episode, is belonging to yourself as a sacred practice. Like
Wow.
she talks about, she describes belonging to yourself as sacred, a deep, almost spiritual form of self-allegiance. It involves trusting your intuition, honoring your values, and being willing to walk alone in your truth. Um,
Mm,
and so how can we do it? So we're going to talk about a little bit about how can we have a spiritual practice and belong to ourselves, right? So one of the
yeah.
first things we can do is notice the body's yes and no. And your body is the communicator. It's often the intuitive translator. So a yes might feel like expansion and warmth and light and full body energy, and no might feel like contraction, tension, nausea, and a sinking feeling. So if we
Mm,
could just do that, pay attention, like that's why we need to be in connection with our bodies. It is the communicator. So I don't care what it looks like. That's distraction. This is a
okay.
tool, right? So if we get to practice, our body will let us know what is right for us. And
Yeah.
to practice that. That's a sacred practice. Another thing to do is practice saying no, even when it's awkward. So
Ugh.
she says each no to something misaligned is a yes to your deeper truth.
Did you ever
So,
read Year of Yes by Shonda
uh,
Rhimes?
I don't know if I read the book, but I watched her podcast interview and I use that all the time when I'm teaching. I refer to that podcast because it was so good.
Oh,
Right. It was so good.
yeah. It
Yeah.
was really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Next time you're tempted to people please, pause and ask, if I say yes, am I abandoning myself? It's a good question.
That is a really good question. And that reminded me of the Buddhist teacher that she ends up meeting, Dr. Halifax,
Mm,
how they were, I guess they were both presenting, and Dr. Halifax was like, I'm gonna go rest. And she's like, oh, I'm gonna go. I don't know what she was
that's
gonna go
right.
meet.
There was like a meet and greet.
Yeah. And she said, well, if we're always exhaling and we're never inhaling, there'll be
Right.
nothing left to exhale. And I really liked that metaphor because I think that we do sometimes just give and give and give and give and give.
Hmm.
And then I feel like I've been shamed a little bit sometimes when I need to take that inhale, and I've had
Hmm.
to say no, like, well, can you give me a reason? I,
Right.
I just need to inhale,
Right.
and maybe I'll be able to put better words to it someday
Yeah.
and better boundaries around that. But I think we really do need to pay more attention to the inhale
Yeah.
sometimes.
I think so too. I mean, and that is the true metaphor. We judge the inhale or exhale, which one's better. And it's like,
I
that's not even,
know.
we don't even need to judge. Like, it's like, you know which one's better? The one that you're, like, if you're exhaling, inhaling is the better one. Like, like whatever you need
Oh yeah,
next. Like, you need both though. Like, and then when you're exhaling, you're going to need an inhale. And when you're inhaling, you're going to need an exhale. Like, and what if we did that with more areas of our life? I think that would be really, really a profound place to come from.
agreed.
All right, another thing she talked about, or that we can do. She didn't talk about this. We can do to belong to ourselves is to write our own permission slips. So I'm going to put a link in the bio, in the not the bio, the link in the show notes where you can download your own permission slip, fill it out, and you can get as many as you want.
That
Um,
sounds awesome. Do
and
our kids
write,
even know what permission slips are?
probably not,
That
probably
is
not.
sad. I would
But
like a pad of that, please. A
right,
pad of permission
right.
slips.
Well, this is it. And this is it. It's they're blank and you can write in whatever you want, but maybe there's some permission to rest. Maybe there's permission to speak up. Maybe there's permission to not know. And
Mm,
then stick these in your purse, in your car, in your mirror, in your journal, and even like think of them as almost like whether it feels good to you to either fill yourself up with this, or even sometimes it helps to think of ourselves as having this little tiny rebellion against
yeah.
abandonment. It's like, no, I am not going to do that. I have a permission slip. Sometimes we need
That's
those reminders.
awesome. I'm
Sometimes
gonna
we need
do
those
one
reminders.
permission to say the wrong thing because I'm so worried about that. So I'm gonna give
Right.
myself permission to say the wrong thing.
Yeah. Say the wrong thing and then see if it's wrong. That's the thing. We don't know it's wrong until it comes out. You don't
Yeah,
know.
true. That's why I have it in my purse because I don't need to pull it out when I say it. I need to pull it out
That's
afterwards.
right. That's right. Okay, another way to belong to yourself as a spiritual practice is to know your core values. And these define how you live and love, and you can use them as a compass. And when you are unsure, you ask, does this align with my values? And again, I'm going to put a link in the show notes of a values list and choose two or three. like first choose 20 or whatever feels right. And then
Mm-hmm.
you start to see how they kind of, and you narrow it down to 2 or 3. And those are your values. And you don't, there's no need to judge it. Other people are going to have different values, but this is your value. And this is what's important for you. And when you make decisions from those values, it just feels so much easier to make decisions. I think it's so true. Another thing to do is check in with your inner child or your inner parts. Sometimes the parts of us that seek approval or fear rejection are younger versions of us.
Hmm.
So sit quietly, place your hand on your heart, and say, what part of me is needing care right now? And just listening can be an act of self-belonging. Just really believe what comes up,
Yeah.
like really believe it. Um, Another thing is create rituals and of self-respect. And so not routines, but rituals. And I thought that was interesting because a routine,
Yeah.
like da da da, but a real ritual where we do this thing and we are completely like what's the word? Intentional with it. It's
Yes. Adding intention. That's what I was gonna say.
yeah. And so maybe a Sunday night candlelit bath to check in how your week was. Maybe a morning mantra like I choose to belong to myself today, or a grounding practice that you feel pulled away from yourself, like um, when you feel pulled away from yourself, like placing your feet on the earth or breathing into your body. Some of those grounding things, just to be with yourself, like belong to yourself. Call
Yeah.
the parts of yourself that's been sucked away back. There's a really good audio meditation on the Wholeness Network library about that, where it's like bringing your parts back together, bringing all of those that are scattered back. And it's really, really good, really helpful. I did it on the
Okay.
bike ride the other day and it was really good.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and number 6, speak your truth even when it shakes. I love that. So start small, be honest about preferences, a boundary, a dream, even a whisper of truth strengthens your self-trust. So as you practice speaking, it,
Hmm.
it goes into your mind and like trust yourself. And like she says, belonging to yourself means willing to belong, to be alone, willing to stand alone. And um, so sometimes we have to speak up for ourselves. And then finally, number 7, celebrate the weird, wild, quiet, tender you. Belonging to yourself means loving the parts of you that don't always make sense to others. Your quirks, your softness, your intensity, your stillness. Make room for your whole self, not just the acceptable parts. And I think that's what
I
we
love
talk
that.
about.
Do you
Yeah.
remember in the book when she was like asking her husband, like, do you think I'm serious? And he was like, yeah, like all the time. And she was like, I'm not fun. And he's like, well, you are, but you're very serious.
Yeah, that's right.
I love that
She had
part.
a totally different perspective of herself than he did. Like, yeah,
Yeah. And it wasn't a shaming thing. He was like, yeah, you're serious. So what? Like, kind of like we talked about in the last podcast, like let your freak flag wave. Right.
yes. I love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, this is kind of woo, so it belongs in this.
Okay.
But speaking of that flag, so I had this, I think I might have told you, but I had this coach. There was this coaching, and they needed hours to practice their coaching. And so I volunteered to
Okay.
be a coach. So I was working with this coach, and it was really interesting over time. This was just a few years ago where, basically in that, for whatever reason, in that coaching session, it came up, like it's like, hey, I have these gifts, like I have these gifts. And she's like, I see this in you. Anyway, that's a side story. But
Okay.
we decided together because it was like almost like I needed to come out. So I had a lot of
Yes.
identity with the LGBTQ plus community because it felt like a big deal to come out. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
she I don't know how we came to get to this, but anyway, I created a flag for myself,
Oh,
because
you
they have their
did.
flag, and I created this flag, and it said, it was just a symbol. It was just a symbol, but it was white. And maybe I'll have to post about it. I'll post my flag.
Yeah.
But it was just my way of symbolizing this is represents me, and I can wave my this is me waving my freak flag is honestly what it was. But it was like
Yeah.
it was this, it was more of a ritual type thing to do where it was like just, hey, I'm just going to accept this is my this is who I am. This is who I am. And it was really vulnerable and like really freeing at the same time. And it's one of
Yeah.
those things though where you feel like you got to come out like all the time. Like they talk about that
Right.
too. I'm like, I get that. I totally get that. I totally get that.
So I remember that post very vividly.
Yeah.
And I was just curious on like, what did you get any pushback from that? Or was
No,
it no?
none.
Okay.
None.
Yeah.
I know. And I was like, did anybody even see this? You know, so that's why you feel like, do I need to do that again? Like, do I need to say? But I think that was it. It was like this, but in my head, did I think I would get all this pushback? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing, nothing.
I know. I remember telling my friends, that I was kind of stepping back from religion a little bit and I was like sweating bullets. Like, my therapist had asked me to send it and they both emailed back and they're like, okay, like we love you. And I was like, you do? And honestly, I was questioning because I'm like, I don't know if I would have been able to offer the same thing. I hope I would have. I
Mm-hmm.
hope I would have.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so funny because you just get so scared of putting yourself out there and showing the vulnerable parts, and people are like, okay.
Right.
Like, wait, what?
I know. And the truth is they're like, oh yeah, listen, like, yeah, you got that, whatever. My thing is this different scary thing. And we
Yeah.
all have our own scary things, our own scary
Hmm.
things. So,
But that's the wilderness, right? That's the wilderness is
yes.
stepping out into that wilderness. It's that Indiana Jones on the Last Crusade moment of like, okay, I'm taking this step and there is a chance I might fall down.
Yep.
There is a big chance. And
Right.
then well, I haven't died yet. So I guess every time I've stepped out, it's been okay.
Yep. I think there was a quote. I think I've posted it twice, but it's like I've survived every single fall I've ever had in my life. Like, and it's true.
Hmm.
Like and what's funny is that what's another part of that too is sometimes you'll go and you'll fall. It'll feel like a falling, but then you're flying. It's like actually
Mm.
you're flying. So when I went skydiving, that was one thing that was really
Oh
interesting
yeah.
is, to think about in my mind and in your mind, think about jumping out of an airplane. Like you feel like they're like, I'm gonna fall. Like, but that initial feeling of your stomach, you know, dropping out lasted just a couple of seconds because
Hmm.
now you're in a new normal. You're
Okay.
not, you're pushing, you're like, you don't have that falling feeling. The
Hmm.
air is like holding you up. I don't know how to explain it, but you kind of think you're going to be like, ah, all the way down. It's like, no, because really soon you get, especially when the parachute goes up, you're just like dangling down, right? You don't feel
Hmm.
that falling feeling. But when
Hmm.
you think about it, you think you're going to feel that falling feeling. The whole, I'm like, I'm going to feel that.
Right.
That just is not how our bodies work. It doesn't keep that tickle in your stomach for 10 minutes. It doesn't.
Wow.
So when I experienced it, I was just like, oh, I never thought about that's totally true. It wouldn't feel like you're falling the whole time, you know,
Yeah.
because it's so long. So anyway, that's interesting. Interesting.
I've read Viola Davis's biography and it was really inspiring. She is an
Mm,
amazing person and she has been through some hard times.
yes.
She talks about growing up, and I don't know that I've ever read a book by anybody that's lived in Rhode Island. I know that sounds weird, but it's just
Yeah.
the tiniest little state, and you don't really hear about it a lot besides being the tiniest state.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't ever think about it as, this is dumb, but I don't think of it as having like the slums or like the really poor that she was talking about. Like
Right.
I attribute that sometimes to bigger cities, like downtown Atlanta where I lived. There were places where the socioeconomic status was definitely lower. And so anyway, just listening to her book was very eye-opening to a different area that I've ever really thought about
Mm,
and or learned about. And just the abject poverty that she lived in. She talked about not knowing if she was going to eat that day,
hmm
or, she had a teacher pull her aside and said, "You smell really, really bad. I need you to
hmm
do something about it." And she was like, "I
Yeah.
don't even know how to be different than I am right now." Like
Right.
nobody taught her about soap. No, it
Right.
just wasn't available. She was surviving.
hmm
Um,
Didn't she have like mice bites or rat bites she would always have
I
to deal
think
with? Something like,
so.
oh,
Like but just and yeah, and
yeah,
her
poor.
parents were just probably young and inexperienced and just that, kind of that cycle of poverty that she lived
Right.
in.
Right.
Um and she just had a lot of perseverance and I just really admired her and
Mm,
looking at some of the roles that she's done, like seeing her in The Help, the part that she played in The Help. I think that was my first time ever seeing her.
yeah.
And I loved her character so much. And I think that there were parts of that character, if she would have go back and nurture herself, she would be that one that says, you are smart, you are kind, you are,
Mm-hmm.
um, and she doesn't really talk a lot about the help in her book though, because for me that was the first time I ever saw her. She talks a lot about her other acting parts and about how much little she didn't get, or how much she did not get paid for some of her acting things, how long it took her to
Mm.
really get into that acting. But I guess Brené got to interview her and ask her some questions about, how it was for her. And the reason I'm talking about this is because it kind of talks about that radical self-acceptance. She had to get a place where she radically accepted who she was, her strength, her power, all of that stuff. And I'm just going to read this part. At 38, things changed. I didn't jump out of bed one morning and everything was perfect. I've always known I was a strong woman, but I wanted fast food joy, quick, easy joy, more tools and tricks. And I also could still fall back into not enough, not pretty enough, not thin enough, not good enough. One day, my therapist asked me a pivotal question. What if nothing changes? Your looks, your weight, your success, would you be okay? For the first time, I thought, you know what? Yes, I would. I really would. This time I realized that the past was not going to define me. And so, she talked about how like the acting culture can be really, really bad. And she said, I think Brené had asked her, if she was gonna develop like a thick skin or whatever. And she said, I don't want that. Thick skin doesn't work anymore. You want to be transparent and translucent. For that to work, I won't own other people's shortcomings and criticisms. I won't put what you say about me on my load.
Mm.
And I just really thought about that translucent and transparent part, and just that's radical self-acceptance, because
Mm.
if our skin wasn't
Mm-hmm.
the color it is, we would be able to see all our insides, right?
Mm-hmm.
And be vulnerable and be open. And I just really like that idea of that, you're going to have to take me how I am.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
Yeah.
And um, she's a really great example of that. I highly recommend her book if you like reading memoirs.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link. So there on Brene Brown's podcast, she interviewed her. So I'm going to link to that because I wonder if that's
Oh,
what that interview was. So I'll make sure that that's in the show notes.
oh, thank you.
But I think it's, and that's the thing is like someone else can bring you in, one at a time, like, hey, you're welcome here. You're welcome here. But if you belong to yourself, then it's done. You know what I mean? Then it's not one at a time. It's like, and that's kind of what I felt like she decided, I belong. This is it. I'm here. And
So
then
should we need to
we never had
read
to do that again.
the Maya Angelou quote again. You're
Yes.
only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place, no place at all. The price is high, the reward is great.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah. Why do you think the price would be high?
That's a good question. I think because it's scary. You jump off that mountain. That's a,
Yeah.
like it's a big risk. It can cost a lot. You can get hurt.
Yeah.
You can get hurt. But the reward of that, the feeling inside your body at like that risk is scary. It's kind of scary. But the reward is great, meaning once you work that out, I think you just become unstoppable, I would think.
I think so too. I think, yeah, there is a cost, right? Meaning like when you pay for something, you give up that money. So sometimes there are things to be given up. Sometimes there are relationships that need to go away. Sometimes there are things that you need to give up, like
Hmm. Right.
a vice, I should say, maybe,
Right.
but the
Right.
reward is so much better than doing that
Right.
other thing.
I think we do this a lot. Like we stay in relationships that maybe, of course you're not going to just be yeehaw outside of a difficult relationship. I feel like that wasn't a great relationship. There might be grief, like to not be
Hmm.
afraid of that grief, and like really let the grief come. And then, the price. So that's a price to pay, is for the grief, of the
Hmm.
loss, or maybe the loss of something you wanted or whatever, but the loss of staying small. There's a grieving to that, it's, and anyway, but the price, but the reward is so great, is because you get to be that true belonging. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you're home. I feel like it's just home.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to do, because of this belonging, I wanted to do a little exercise, and so that we could become a little bit more self-acceptance.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
So true belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. So take a deep breath and let yourself settle in for a moment, and now gently bring your awareness inside. So kind of pull yourself into yourself, maybe into that heart space. And as you kind of scan your body, notice if there's parts of you or a part of you that feels uncomfortable. Just let a part of your body present itself, or to arise with some kind of sensation. And maybe this sensation has a feeling, maybe it feels ashamed, maybe it's unsure when the idea of self-acceptance comes up, so it's like this part's just kind of like, I don't know. It feels uncomfortable with the idea of self-acceptance. And don't try to change it, just notice where it lives in your body. Notice exactly what it feels like. Is there a tightness, a weight, a flutter, whatever it is, just really feel what that feels like. That kind of that pushing away of that acceptance, the resistance of the acceptance. And now in that heart space, tap into that compassionate part of who you are, that compassionate self-energy, this part of you that's calm, curious, connected, has a little more clarity about things. And just turn toward that part and say silently, I see you. And then just listen for a minute so that we can connect with that self-compassionate energy. And once we are connected to that, with that self-energy, let's turn toward that part, that sensation in your body that's maybe resistant to feeling acceptable, that self-acceptance, and say to it, I see you. And wait for a minute. Maybe you won't hear a word, maybe you will, if there's something it wants you to know. Maybe it's afraid that if you accept yourself, you'll stop trying. Maybe it believes that being hard on you is the only thing keeping you safe. Maybe it carries an old burden, a message it learned long ago, that you're not enough, or that you're too much, or somehow broken. So really listen to this part, not as a problem, but as a protector. How its purpose was to keep you safe, to protect you from upset, pain, sorrow, whatever that looks like. And say to this part, thank you for trying to protect me. I see that you've been doing this a long time. You don't have to change or go away. I just want to get to know you. Just allow it to be there. And let it know that you're okay, that it's here. And just notice how it responds to that kind of kindness, that kind of presence. What does it change? Does it say anything? Does it have more it wants to say? Just allow whatever presents itself to be okay. Invite it in. And stay with it. Keep offering curiosity. When it answers a question or gives you a sensation, ask and be curious about that. And let it know you're not alone anymore. We can do this together. And thank that part for showing up for you today. Let it know that you'll come back to it and that you're open to building a relationship. We're now going to be a team, and that you will listen better to this part from now on. And the truth is, you're not broken, you're not bad. You are a beautiful system of parts, each doing its best to help you survive and find a way to fit in. But now we're going to move towards belonging. And just feel inside your body what belonging might feel like. And really pay attention to those sensations, where it shows up, and what it feels like. And together you and that part can move in that direction. And when it feels right for you, you can bring yourself back. You can take one last deep cleansing breath, open your eyes, and return to your current present state.
When most people are asked what they want, they will answer, I want to be happy. But happy takes practice. And that's what the Wholeness Library is all about. So check it out free at thewholenessnetwork.com.